Yeah. Yeah. Welcome back, man. Yeah. I know it's been a minute. We back. Yeah. My I got some new shit,
what I talk. No more demons in the light is what I fought. Another one bites the dust as I reflect on the bodies I caught. Laughing in the face of danger like you lost.
So you know how we start. You know we gotta start it up,
more
man.
often than not,
We gotta start it up. Welcome back, man. I know it's been a minute. People been hitting me up like, man, stop like a candlestick.
I've been working all these young brothers cutting off for their bricks. You ain't paid child support, so your baby mama on only free. Make it a start, take some dick from a nigga death. Take some dick, die slow. You can't get involved in these streets because it's tribal. You are your bowl if your fiend die off that.
Welcome back to another episode of Intentional Thought Podcast. It's your boy, Uncle Truth. And today's episode, and I mean today's episode, man, listen, this one right here is a doozy, man. This ain't no little appetizer, this a full damn meal. This one, you just don't throw on while you washing dishes. You're gonna sit with this one. We talking about classified programs, the government swore didn't exist, ancient beings buried in desert soil, metallic tech falling out the sky in South America, and then we gonna end with something deeper than any conspiracy. The ancestors spinning the block through synchronicity. So take a breath, lock in, and let's get intentional, man. Yeah, this is my new track too, man. I'm about to release there soon, man. Yeah. This is the first listen on here. But yeah, so without further ado, man, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for this first segment, we starting off strong as hell, man. So there's one name I need y'all to know today, and that's Dr. James T. Lacatski. I mean, this not some dude making orb videos in his backyard. This a defense intelligence agency lifer, rocket scientist, doctor, and engineer. The man held a Q level clearance. That's basically a nuclear level clearance. You don't even get to know like the question type dude. Like, he's one of the people who sits in classified rooms all day studying Russian missiles, Chinese hypersonics, Iranian drone systems, and that's just a regular ass Tuesday for this dude. And in all that the work, he starts seeing objects in our airspace, doing things nothing on Earth should be able to do. No wings, no control surfaces, no propulsion signatures, just impossible shit going on, man. So most people ignore it, laugh it off, stick it in an email draft and to keep their job safe. But Lacatski, he looks at it and goes, if this is real, somebody's gonna weaponize it before we do. And that's how you get AAWSAP. AAWSAP, they call it AAWSAP, and it's the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. This wasn't a collect spooky stories type program. This was take the phenomenon seriously, and as an engineering problem, they pulled in physicists, doctors, biologists, aerospace experts, and they asked questions that nobody else wanted to ask. If these crafts exist, how do they work? So they commissioned a real technical papers on warp drives, wormholes, anti-gravity and gravity wave communication, vacuum energy, programmable matter, cloaking systems. And this wasn't science fiction. This was the Pentagon saying, basically show us the physics behind it. So then they go to Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah, the ranch that people, they said they seen werewolves or orbs or creatures. They even say they seen a dino beaver. Yeah, that's right. They said they saw dino beavers, man, and shadow entities. They said those are the effects of what happens when you interact with the phenomenon. So it's definitely something that interferes with your consciousness. They sent former military, former law enforcement, all cleared up the chain, and the moment their boots hit the dirt, weird shit just starts happening all over the whole ranch. And the craziest part, it follows them home. Orbs in kids' bedrooms, scratches, poltergeist type stuff. Like, no agency basically wants this in their case file. But Lacatski, he just says, like, man, you know, that's down to us, man. We need to know everything that's going on. So then he drops the bomb nobody wants to even talk about. In 2011, inside the U.S. Capitol, in a secure meeting with a senator and Undersecretary Lacatski, just basically straight up says the United States is in possession of a craft of unknown origin. And this not no rumor, not somebody told me this. He says, we have this thing and they got inside it. Okay, so he basically describes it as a smooth, seamless, no wings, no engine, no fuel tanks, no exhaust, nothing that makes sense, but it flew. And that's why those warp drive papers were necessary, not crazy, but necessary. And then the public hears about AATIP in 2017, the little sanitized version of the story. And Lacatski is like, nah, man, that's AAWSAP was the real program. That was the black budget. AATIP was like the smaller and program. And Arrow is basically like the narrative control of the whole thing. And the same pattern, compartmentalize, sanitize, and release only what keeps the people, basically keeps the people calm. And that's why we start here, because this same architecture, black budgets, narrative control, partial truths, is something that shows up again in politics, foreign policy, and the Epstein triangle. So it's basically a different topic, but the same playbook. All right, so before we jump into Epstein and Trump and all that mess, man, we gotta hit something that sits right in between Lacatski and the world and everything else in this episode. Because while Lacatski is out here talking about AAWSAP, Skinwalker Ranch, hitchhikers, and the recovered craft, there's a whole new documentary that tries to explain the politics around the secret. It's called The Age of Disclosure. And the key thing with this film is this: it's not asking do UFOs exist, it's asking who controls the secret and what are they fighting over. This is not no UFO movie. It's basically a power movie, and in my opinion, man, it's a very historical movie that I think everybody definitely needs to watch. So the film sets it up like a political thriller. On one side, you got what they call the legacy program, and then on the other side is the reformers. The legacy side is the shadow state, 80 years deep, intelligence agencies, special access programs, and big contractors like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Battelle, all wrapped together. According to the people in the film, that's where the recovered craft and non-human bodies basically are. That's where the real toys are. No FOIA, no congressional oversight, funded off the books since the 1940s. when they talk numbers, they basically saying it's in like the trillions have basically flowed through this thing over time, man, in basically 80 years. So the reformers, that's the group trying to drag this topic out of the basement into something like a real government process. That includes folks from AATIP, the UAP task force, and their allies in Congress. Now, they're not perfect, but the main point is they're trying to get eyes on a program that's been running rogue since Roswell. So the movie says, look, it's not the government versus the people, it's a civil war inside the whole national security state. Man, it's just crazy as hell, man. And here's where it basically ties back into Lacatski. So you notice in this film, they make AATIP like the star. They lean heavy on Lou Elizondo. They talk about the $22 million that funded the big Pentagon UFO program. But what they do low key is like roll AAWSAP into AATIP like it's the same thing, and they're not at all. They don't want to talk about the part Lacatski was swimming in Skinwalker Ranch, which is the hitchhiker effects, the weird orbs, the poltergeist, the biological effects, and all the so-called woo-woo type stuff. And they scrub the weirdness and give you the easiest to swallow version, which is military encounters, tic-tacs, radar tapes, and fighter pilots. So you got George Knapp and other folks in the background like, hold up, man, y'all simplified this history. The money went into AAWSAP, not AATIP. You leaving out the weirdest data, man, and the wildest data. The biological harm, the hitchhiker stuff, like the whole Skinwalker file, which people at this point, you can't say that shit's not real, man. So in a way, the age of disclosure is disclosure with edges sanded off. So now who's actually in this film, because the cast is crazy as hell, man. All the top-notch like military government officials, man. So you got Lou Elizondo, former head of AATIP. He's not just some talking head, he's central to the reformer side. In the film, he talks about smear campaigns run on him by the Pentagon, and he says flat out that inside this program, they learned that Roswell incident was actually real, and he's not saying that at some UFO convention. He's saying it on camera as a former DOD insider and executive producer on the film. Okay, and then you got Jay Stratton. He used to run the official UAP task force for the government. He's not saying I heard about stuff. He's saying I saw craft and beings with my own eyes, and he backs David Grush, the whistleblower, saying David Grush basically told the truth about barely scratched the surface. Stratton also says he was warned by senior presidential advisors that full disclosure could have enormous economic consequences. That tells you this isn't just some spooky shit, man. This is about markets, defense stocks, and global power. Then you got the science dudes, which is Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis. These are the same names that pop up around AAWSAP, Bigelow, Lacatski, all of that shit, man. So Hal Puthoff lays out the warp bubble idea, that the craft don't fly like planes, they manipulate space-time.
With enough energy, you could create a bubble, a warp bubble, around a spacecraft that would have a different property of space-time inside the bubble than on the outside of the bubble.
This energy field would completely isolate the craft from the environment. So you might ask then, how does the craft actually move forward within its bubble?
The craft inside the bubble has a way of altering the bubble's properties in order to change its direction of motion.
Such that you have a downward press in front and an upward press behind. So it'd be like riding space-time in the same way that a surfer would ride a wave in the ocean. And we observe hypersonic velocity and instantaneous acceleration. And the reason is that time is moving differently for people inside the bubble versus people outside the bubble. Whoever's inside the craft would feel like they're just cruising along. They wouldn't be feeling the effects of what looks like speeds and accelerations that would turn a human being into pudding. This one breakthrough can be the key to interstellar travel, where you want to travel long distances without taking enormous amounts of subjective time. We'd also have low observability because the bubble acts as a barrier between two space-time environments. This would eliminate or conceal most of the known signatures of conventional technologies. This is why radar would have difficulty tracking a craft, because the signal from the radar would be distorted by the energy field around the craft.
The radar signatures literally just moved around the bubble and doesn't reflect back to the radar emitter.
So it's not surprising when someone takes a photo of a UAP, they find they get a fuzzy and distorted picture because they're actually taking a photo through a space-time barrier. What's been happening recently is that we have upgraded our sensor systems on our fighter.
Even Eric Davis gets even more raw. He says crash retrieval programs exist. He says he knows of the latest 2 types of non-human entities. He talks about 4 bodies being recovered at Roswell, and he says Grush is 100% accurate. That's a heavy phrase to put on a record. And then they bring in Senator Marco Rubio, and this is where power comes into play. Rubio basically tells you the president of the United States is not the top of the food chain. He says it's naive to think a president can just walk in and get all the files, because presidents come and go, members of Congress come and go, but the contractors, Lockheed, Northrop, Raytheon, Battelle, they're permanent. They live longer than administrations. They become FOIA-proof vaults, basically. So Rubio's biggest fear on camera is not, are aliens real? It's that China beats us to the reverse engineering finish line. He says if they crack this tech first, we basically are fucked. Then you got James Clapper, a former director of national intelligence, confirming that UAP activity over Area 51 and sensitive ranges are all real too. You got Dr. Gary Nolan, Stafford immunologist, showing the biological damages in people who got too close to these things, cancers, neurological damage, autoimmune diseases, man, just all type of shit. So here's another thing. If you see a spacecraft, an alien, any of that, man, don't touch it. Don't touch it with your bare hands. You will get sick and you will die. And then to ground it in something your average person can't brush off, you get the pilots, which is David Favor talking about the Tic Tac dropping from 80,000 to 20,000 feet like it fell through a trap door. Then you got Ryan Graves talking about UAPs hanging around his carrier group day after day off the East Coast. And then to top it off all the way, man, hovering in the background are names like David Grush, even Bob Lazar, who is an old school UFO name. Grush, he's saying he saw photos of the non-human beings from these programs.
Talking about encounters, there's a lot of people talking about videos, and we've seen a lot of that. Can we just cut it down to, you believe that we have encountered alien beings and that they've come to Earth and that we know about it as a U.S. government?
That seems to be the case. I don't like to characterize necessarily where they came from. They're definitely some kind of non-human sentience, but it is true, believe it or not, we've recovered the vehicles, and we actually have physical proof, and I was actually partially cleared into some of those activities. It was beyond oral testimony provided to me. I actually had partial access to the data and actually read the intelligence reports resulting from those programs.
Like with your own eyes,
Correct.
You saw it.
Yes.
Lazar's old school claims about gravity-based propulsion now suddenly rhyme with what Putoff and Davis are saying on camera in 2025, and Bob Lazar was saying that stuff back in the 80s, man. So this film big thesis is basically simple. It isn't a rumor anymore. This is an 80-year-old cover-up backed by a legacy program being dragged into the light by a group of reformers who are fighting their own government and contractors that sit on top of this tech, man. That's basically what it is. They all have the power and they ain't trying to let it go at all. But here's where I'll bring it back to what we was talking about with Lacatski. The documentary chooses to tell a clean, streamlined story. Crash retrievals, reformers versus legacy, good guys versus bad guys, warp bubbles, China, Russia, nuclear sites. Yo, it puts AATIP at the task force at the center and makes the nuts and bolts military respectable versions of the story but not the whole story. But what it softens and what Lacatski and AAWSAP lived in is the stuff that makes reality uncomfortable. Hitchhikers that follow you home, orbs inside people's houses, poltergeist events, the paranormal bleeding into the physical. That's the part that makes scientists and politicians nervous, because you can't manage that easily. You can't turn that into a nice policy memo. So the age of disclosure is powerful, but it's also curated. It's disclosed by erosion. It chips away at the wall. It gives you the faction war, the big names, the quotes, the stakes, but it still leaves that core question hanging. If all these people, Stratton, Elizondo, Putoff, Davis, Rubio, Clapper, the pilot, scientists, are all on camera saying, yeah, there's a legacy program, yeah, we have craft, yeah, we have bodies, then who exactly is still sitting on the deepest layer of the secret? So the film makes one thing clear, that the people with the clearest picture might not be presidents, they might not be senators, they might not be the same type of contractors who run black budgets, who build experimental weapons, and who don't answer to the people at all. And once you understand that, it becomes real easy to see the same pattern when we switch gears. Basically the same way they play hide and seek with warp bubbles and crash retrievals, they play hide and seek with power, blackmail, and human beings too, man. All right, so now let's talk about that triangle. We talk about Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, and the U.S.-Israel power structure. This isn't gossip. I'm not talking tabloids. I'm talking about incentives, patterns, networks. Epstein just wasn't no PDF file. That's just the starter pack narrative. This man was running a whole infrastructure. Money on one side, girls on the other, cameras in the middle. The only publicly known billionaire he claimed as clients were Leslie Wexner and Leon Black. He had Wexner so wrapped up that he held power of attorney over this dude's money, which is unheard of. Then you bring in Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter, tied into intelligence circles, and Epstein starts looking less like a standalone predator and more like an asset. Now we examine Trump and Epstein. Their relationship fell out, the emails, the flights, the islands. In the 1980s and the 1990s, Trump and Epstein were tight like a lock, man. According to multiple timelines, Trump is said in a 2002 New York Magazine interview, "I've known Jeffrey for 15 years. He's a terrific guy, likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them on the younger side." But flight logs show Trump flew on Epstein's private jet 7 times between 1993 and 1997. They were spotted together at social events, 1997 Victoria's Secret Angels Party in New York with Trump, Epstein, and members of that circle. In 2000, Trump, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Melania Knowles, later Melania Trump, were at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach. Then the falling out in 2004, Trump outbid Epstein for a Palm Beach mansion, reported by the Washington Post as the pivot. Trump later claimed he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago in 2007 over behavior with young girls at the club. But I'm pretty sure they knew that all this stuff was about to come out, so he tried to distance himself as much as possible. Now, let's layer in the crime and intelligence parts. One of Epstein's most public victims, Virginia Goff, said she worked at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in 2000 before being recruited by Maxwell and Epstein. Epstein's little black book from 2015, which contained 1,571 contacts to be exact. That book also included names like Prince Andrew, Ehud Barak, and then in 2011, an email from Epstein to Maxwell said, Trump spent hours at my house with an unnamed victim and referred to Trump as that dog that hasn't barked. Another bombshell. Okay, then there's the political backlash. In July 2025, the United States Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation issued a memo saying there was no credible evidence that Epstein had a formal client list, implicating current office holders. In November 2025, the bill dubbed the Epstein Files Transparency Act passed the U.S. House and Senate and was signed by Trump, forcing the DOJ to release thousands of pages of extremist case files within 30 days. So them 30 days is coming up real soon, so we about to see how that works out. Now let's weave in the intelligence angle. Maxwell family links to the Israeli intelligence network, Barak's business ties to Epstein. It's not that Israel runs everything, but the pattern is clear. Sex trafficking, surveillance tech, intelligence operations, resource extraction, all tying to the same ecosystem. Epstein is a node, so is Trump. So are many others. The difference, Trump tries to spin it as he knew him, but I ended it. And the public record is very messy. Then you have the narrative control moves. Trump once said that Epstein's story was a hoax. Some of his own base says we're owed everything. The leader told us they were hiding everything. Now he's part of the system that's hiding something. And the playbook is the same one we saw in segment 1, man. Compartmentalize truths, outsource dirty work, manage narrative, reveal just enough to control the damage. Now we leaving politics and diving into some ancient biological, what the hell is that territory. All right, now let's drop into Peru, Nazca, the land of geoglyphs, now infamous for pterodactyl mummies. In 2015, a gravedigger finds bodies preserved in siliceous earth, natural desiccation. Over 200 bodies and fragments. Most have 3 long fingers, 3 long toes. Some look like small gray aliens. Others look 4 to 5 feet tall humanoids. These aren't stitched dolls. They got scans to prove it. Forensic experts, radiologists, medical examiners from Peru, Mexico, and the US all ran CT scans. They said the anatomy was self-consistent. Bones, tendons, capillaries, organs. One even appeared pregnant with a tactile fetus. Then the metal implants. Some mummies had neck implants made of osium and cadmium. Osium is 1,500 times rarer than gold. Both metals only identified by human science in the 1800s, but these implants were fused to bone, meaning they were alive when they got them. And here comes another cover-up. The Peruvian government starts seizing bodies, mixing legitimate specimen with fake wooden dolls, creating confusion, making it look just silly and stupid. So, classic intelligent tactic. Bury the truth under trash so the media laughs. Carbon dating says 700 to 1800 years old. DNA comes back 70% known primate, 30% other. Like, they don't know what the other is at all. Scientists who speak up get mocked by their own institutions, and anytime experts risk their careers to say, we looked at the scans, these were biological beings, that's when you start to pay attention. So you don't hide hoaxes, you hide threats. Okay, so now let's jump to Colombia 2025. Locals see a metallic orb zigzagging across the sky, moving like it was disrespecting physics. Then it drops outside the town of Buga. They run to it, and immediately everything gets weird. The sphere's weight changes. Sometimes it's 4 pounds, sometimes it's 22. No human tech can do that. The ground where it landed, it basically everything is dead, grass fried, soil scorched, like radiation or an electromagnetic discharge happened there. Researchers scan it. Inside is a central chip surrounded by 18 microspheres, wired in fiber optic like strands. The metal is 3 times harder than aerospace aluminum. Then the craziest part, viral videos show people chanting Sanskrit mantras next to it, and the sphere starts to vibrate back and forth.
Karunavataram samsarasaram bhujagendraharam sada vasantam hidriyaravinde vavam vamami sahitam namami.
And that's not no hoax, man. That's not a fuel tank. That's responsive technology. Then Stephen Greer, which I don't know, man. I'm starting to really get second thoughts about Stephen Greer. He seems like another asset. But he says carbon dating puts it at 12,560 years old. Skeptics say the chain of custody must be verified, which is a fair point, but nobody makes a fake object that old, that hard, that reactive, and that heavy on some days and light on others. And the people speaking aren't elites. They're locals with cell phone footage, scientists with scans, even skeptics giving honest concerns. So that's how basically the truth leaks, man, from a ground up. And whether this is alien scrap or an ancient human experiment, the Buga Sphere reminds us that strangest discoveries always start with regular people brave enough to talk first. All right, now we're closing with something deeper than all of that. This is what I like to call hard truth, ancestral law. George Floyd and Charlie Kirk. 2 men born the same day, October 14th, Libras, the scales. One became a global symbol of justice. The other spent years mocking that symbol and mocking the suffering of our people. Floyd's death was a global reset. The world erupted. People marched from Minneapolis to Greece. That was justice energy ripping through the collective. Kirk pushed lies. Fentanyl killed him. Black on black crime, mocking the pain of an entire people. That's not political disagreement, that's spiritual provocation. In ancestral terms, birthdays are gateways. They're thin veil days, and Floyd and Kirk shared one. Floyd died from pressure to the neck. Kirk also died from severe neck trauma. That's karmic symmetry. That's the scales of justice doing what human systems refuse to do. After his death, white supremacists panicked and started threatening HBCUs. Schools expelled black students for mocking Kirk, forgetting that nobody ever protected us when they mocked Floyd, Trayvon, Tamir, Breonna. Hypocrisy exposes itself. The ancestors speak through irony, through mirrored fates, through synchronicity. This was spiritual whistleblowing. You can't mock Black Death without cosmic consequences. And any black person defending Kirk, that's overseer energy. You siding with Massa. Floyd embodied justice energy. Kirk embodied denial. Same birthday, same fate. The scales balanced. Yeah. Thank y'all for rocking with me on another episode.
Cool, what's up? Johnny, Blaze, how you been?
Appreciate y'all, man.
Yeah, I like this. Tony, Sticks.
Sorry it took so long to make another one, but you know we back. You know I come back when I need it, like Superman. You feel me? And that's it. That's this episode of Intentional Thought, from Lacatski and the Black Budget UFO programs, the ancient pterodactyl beings in Nazca, to the Buga Sphere humming back at humans, to the karmic loop between Floyd and Kirk. Everything today pointed to one truth. Truth leaks. Whether it's scientists with scans, a soldier with classified footage, a local with shaky camera, or an ancestor dropping cosmic irony, the truth finds a crack to escape through always. Stay sharp, protect the truth tailors, honor the ancestors, and never forget justice balances itself whether we ready or not. Alright, y'all, thanks for tapping in. Like, subscribe, share this episode, and remember to always keep it intentional, one thought at a time.